Okay, so picture this scene. Carnegie Hall, 1936. There's a blizzard howling outside.
Right.
Inside, the great violinist Bronislaw Huberman is getting ready. But then, bam, in like 60 seconds flat, his 1713 Stradivarius, the Gibson one, it just vanishes backstage.
Just like that. And the thief, a local musician, Julian Altman.
Exactly. It seems almost casual, doesn't it? Stealing this priceless violin like it's nothing. Pretty wild start.
It really is. And it sets the stage perfectly for what we're diving into today, this whole fascinating, sometimes strange world of stolen high-value violins, especially Strads.
Yeah.
They're more than just instruments, aren't they? They're these cultural icons. And when they disappear, the stories can be unbelievable.
Totally. We're all kind of captivated by them, the history, that sound everyone talks about, the crazy prices.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this other side, this sort of hidden world of theft and lost treasures, and sometimes these amazing recoveries.
Against all odds sometimes.
Right. So we've looked into some really compelling cases. And our mission here is to understand, why these violins? Why are they targets? What are the thieves doing? How are people trying to get them back? And what actually happens to them?
And to give you the core story, the key insights, without getting lost in, every single tiny detail.
Exactly. So let's jump back to that Carnegie Hall theft. The Gibson X Huberman.
Okay. What's amazing about that one, like you said, is the boldness. But also, what happened next to the violin? It went from Carnegie Hall to... Well, Altman played in speakeasies for a bit.
No way.
Yeah, and then took it on the road with carnival bands, vaudeville shows. Just think about that. A multi-million-dollar Stradivarius playing in those kinds of settings.
It's almost comical, isn't it? He even pawned it a few times, apparently.
He did. Pawned it for grocery money, then won some card games and got it back.
And get this, the strings. He supposedly used hardware store wire for strings.
Can you imagine hardware store wire? To avoid anyone noticing, probably. A real luthier would spot proper strings instantly.
Any violinist would just cringe. And there was that close call in Washington, right? A dealer nearly ID'd it.
He did. Altman must have had some serious nerve. Or maybe, just maybe, he didn't fully grasp what he actually had.
That's a really key point, isn't it? Sometimes the thieves, they just don't get the real significance. They treat these incredible artifacts almost casually.
Pawning a Strad for groceries certainly suggests that, yeah. But the real twist, the big reveal, comes much, much later.
Decades later. Okay, so fast forward to 1985. Altman's dying, and he finally tells his wife, "You know that old violin under the couch?
Yeah.
It's worth millions. Millions. Can you imagine hearing that? And that confession kicks everything off."
That's the catalyst. His widow gets in touch with Lloyd's of London. They'd paid out the insurance claim to Huberman way back.
Must have been quite the process, verifying it after all that time, checking the wood, the maker's mark.
Oh, absolutely. A huge undertaking. But they confirmed it. It was restored in London and eventually found its way back into the top tier of the music world. Joshua Bell ended up buying it.
Right, in 2001. Paid just under $4 million for it then.
And now?
Now it's estimated over $14 million. Bell calls it his partner in crime, which is kind of funny. He even talks about Altman apparently keeping it in a sock drawer sometime.
A sock drawer? Wow.
It's just this incredible aha moment, this totally unexpected recovery after nearly 50 years. And the contrast, Altman's life versus the violin's journey.
It is quite something. And poignant too, the Huberman himself never saw it again.
Yeah.
Died hoping, apparently.
Yeah, but his name's still on the label. A reminder. But not all these stories wrap up so neatly, do they? Take the David F. Marini Stradivarius.
No, that's a very different story. Much darker, really.
Unresolved.
So, 1995, the violinist Erica Marini, she was 81, living in Manhattan. Her 1727 Stradivarius was stolen right from her apartment.
And the weird thing there was how it happened.
Exactly. No forced entry, no fingerprints left behind, no ransom note, nothing. It feels almost invisible, like someone knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, very unsettling. There was something about a flickering light in the hallway. An electrician was due.
That's right. The theory is someone might have slipped in during that confusion. And Marini, she had made this big comeback with recordings on that violin. She died just 8 days after the theft without even knowing it was gone.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. And the suspects. It pointed towards people she knew, didn't it?
Potentially. Her late manager still had keys. There's a former repair guy who'd apparently dealt in fake bows before. So yeah, suspicion of an inside job was strong, but nothing concrete. The trail went cold.
And now it's just missing.
Still missing.
Yeah.
It's on the FBI's top 10 art crimes list. Estimated value now, probably over $20 million.
Wow.
And the really disturbing thought is, where is it? Is it locked away in some Swiss vault somewhere unseen? Or even worse, was it maybe broken up for parts by someone who didn't even realize what they had?
Ugh. That's the nightmare scenario for art crime, isn't it? Permanent loss.
It really underscores that risk, a total contrast to the Gibson recovery. Yeah, definitely not an aha moment there. But, okay, thankfully there have been other recoveries, even if the circumstances are sometimes a bit random. Like Minjin Kim's Strad.
Oh, that's a great example of how differently these things can happen. Hers was stolen at Euston Station in London. Broad daylight.
While she was doing what, grabbing a sandwich?
Exactly, just ordering a sandwich. It shows how vulnerable musicians can be, even just for a moment, in a public place.
And how did they get it back? That was pure luck, wasn't it?
Pretty much. 3 years later, it turned up in a pawn shop. Apparently, the owner thought it was just a cheap copy. If he'd known. Who knows? So yes, chance definitely played a big part there.
And Roman Totenberg's Ames Strad.
Yeah.
Also stolen, but recovered differently again.
Right. That one was taken from his office at the Longy School of Music. The recovery there came about because the thief's ex-girlfriend tried to sell it.
She took it to a pawnbroker, and that triggered an alert in one of those stolen art databases. So these recoveries, they happen in all sorts of ways, sometimes luck, sometimes these tracking systems kicking in. Which brings us to the big question.
Why? Why Stradivarius violins specifically? What makes them such prime targets?
Well, you touched on one key thing earlier, supply and demand. There's not that many of them left. Stradivari made around, 1,100 instruments in total?
Something like that.
And maybe only 600 violins are still known to exist. That rarity alone drives up the value immensely.
Okay, scarcity. Makes sense. But there's more to it, right? The sound itself.
Oh, absolutely. The legend around the Stradivarius sound, the sort of singing clarity in the high notes, the warmth on the lower G string, it's become almost mythical. Whether it's measurably better than the best modern instruments is debated, but the reputation is undeniable. Top performers want that sound, or at least that legacy.
And then there's just the cold, hard cash aspect.
Yep. Simple economics, the resale value is astronomical. They've outperformed stocks, tech, you name it, as investments.
Plus, they're small enough to carry easily.
Relatively portable, yes. And crucially, unlike a house or a car, there isn't usually a formal title deed that travels with the instrument. That lack of clear, universally tracked ownership can make them seem, well, easier to move, theoretically.
Interesting point.
And unfortunately, there's sometimes a perception, rightly or wrongly, that the penalties for art theft might be less severe than for, say, armed robbery. So for some criminals, it might seem like a high reward, maybe lower risk crime, though still very much a serious crime, obviously.
So it's a mix of things. Rarity, legend, value, portability, lack of formal title, maybe perceived lower penalties. Okay, so how are thieves actually pulling these off beyond the opportunistic grab, and what are law enforcement and others doing to fight back?
Well, we saw the opportunistic stuff exploiting chaos during concerts, bathroom breaks, unlocked dressing rooms, even open taxi doors. Those moments are key vulnerabilities.
Right.
But the tracking side has gotten way better. The art loss register is huge. They have this massive database with detailed photos, histories, the provenance files. That's vital.
And technology is playing a bigger role, too. You mentioned RFID chips.
Yeah, tiny microdot identifiers and RFID chips are being used more. They're so small, they don't impact the sound, but they can be scanned.
And I read something fascinating about luthiers photographing the wood grain, like a fingerprint.
Exactly. High-resolution photos of the unique grain pattern of the wood specific to that tree, that piece of wood, and software can compare those patterns. So if an instrument turns up at customs, they might be able to match it.
That sounds pretty effective. Have they caught things that way?
It's definitely helping. Customs agents, say in Chicago, have reportedly flagged instruments based on RFID signals. Now, sometimes there are mix-ups, like a cello being detained when it wasn't actually stolen, but the potential is there.
Okay, so that's the tech side. What about the people, policing?
The FBI has its dedicated art crime team. That's important. They often pair agents with actual musicologists.
Really? Experts who can spot a Stradivarius scroll from across the room.
Sort of, yeah. People who know the field, know the instruments, they monitor online sales, auction houses, cultivate informants. And internationally, you've got Interpol sharing serial numbers and alerts.
And wasn't there something about dogs?
Yes. Europol is apparently training dogs to sniff out the specific old hide glue used in making these instruments.
Whoa. Sent trained dogs for violins. That's dedication.
Okay.
And the insurance companies are heavily involved, too.
Oh, absolutely. They have a lot at stake.
Yeah.
They might hire former intelligence folks like ex-MI5 negotiators to handle ransom situations if they arise.
Using cryptocurrency for ransoms.
Dealing with crypto payments, yes. And requiring things like CT scans, non-invasive ones, to verify an instrument's authenticity before they'll even insure it for millions. Plus, specialized transport.
Like armored cars for violins.
Pretty much. Secure, climate-controlled transport. It shows the level of value and risk involved.
It really does sound like this constant technological arms race, doesn't it? Security improves, thieves adapt.
It is. Thieves are using RFID jammers now, apparently. Or trying to fool CT scans by putting bits of plain wood inside.
And even taking instruments apart.
Yeah, disassembling them to smuggle them more easily. Like that Guadagnini cello that was caught in Hong Kong. It was labeled furniture parts.
Furniture parts. Unbelievable. So they're constantly trying to stay one step ahead.
And law enforcement and security experts are responding with things like high-fidelity 3D printing to create perfect replicas for study or display.
Yeah.
And exploring even more advanced tracking, like tiny gyroscopic GPS sensors, perhaps. It's ongoing.
Which brings us back, in a way, to the people behind these crimes, the human side. It's not always just about the money, is it?
No, not always. We talked about Totenberg's thief. He seemed genuinely obsessed, thinking owning the Strad would somehow make him a better musician.
A sort of magical thinking?
Kind of. And Altman, with the Gibson, maybe he had this long-term dream, however unrealistic, that it would be his ticket to success or security eventually.
And the Davidoff Marini. That felt different.
That seems more likely to be about a single big payday. But as whoever took it probably found out, selling a famous hot Stradivarius is incredibly difficult. Any legitimate dealer, any serious collector, they know these instruments. They'd spot it.
It's almost too famous to sell.
In many ways, yes. Which is why some might end up hidden away or tragically destroyed.
You know, you mentioned earlier the scars these instruments pick up, the repaired crack on the Gibson, the Ames getting a new neck graft after it was recovered. Does that diminish them?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
Many connoisseurs and musicians would say no. They see those repairs, those signs of age and use, as part of the instrument's story, its journey.
Adds character.
Exactly. They're not just static museum pieces. They're working tools with incredibly rich histories. Those imperfections become part of the narrative, showing they've survived, they've been played, they've lived.
So looking ahead then, what's the future hold for keeping these instruments safe?
Well, we're likely to see more musicians registering their instruments in those databases, making tracking easier.
More data for customs agents to work with.
Right, and more performers traveling with dedicated security, even if it's discreet. But absolute, 100% security, probably impossible.
Why is that?
As long as these instruments are being used, being played in concerts, traveling the world, there's always going to be some element of risk. A moment's inattention, a clever thief. It can still happen.
It's kind of amazing then that something as simple as publicity can be so effective.
It really is. The second a major violin like a Strad goes missing, the news goes global. Pictures are everywhere. The whole music world is on alert.
Makes it incredibly hard to fence.
Very. We saw that with a stolen violin recently. Not a Strad, but still valuable. The social media outcry was so intense, the thief just abandoned it. Couldn't risk trying to sell it.
So public awareness is actually a powerful security tool.
A surprisingly powerful one, yes.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive today, just exploring this crossroads of incredible music history, high-stakes crime, and these really personal human stories wrapped up in these instruments.
It's a unique world.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Next time you see a world-class musician on stage with one of these amazing instruments, you might wonder about all the invisible layers of security, the registries, the photos, the people working behind the scenes to protect these things.
Absolutely. That ongoing effort to keep these cultural treasures safe for the future. It's a constant challenge.
Well, thank you for exploring all this with me. It's been incredibly insightful.
My pleasure. Always fascinating to talk about.
Until our next deep dive, thanks for joining us.